Hello, everyone. My name is Chibi Walkway from the class of 2023, and I'm the second marshal on the 2023 class committee. Welcome to the seventh Real World for Recent Grads event and the first of 2025. Based on the beloved Senior Spring event series held over the past several years, Real World for Recent Grads will bring together recent college graduates from across 10 classes to learn from each other and discuss recent real world topics. This virtual event series will be hosted by class leaders in partnership with the Harvard Alumni Association. Today, we'll be discussing entrepreneurship and leveraging your skills. We hope that these are fun, informal, and casual for us, by us events. We also hope that these can be conversational and not just a lecture. So if you're able to, please have your camera turned on, and we welcome your participation in the chat during the opening remarks. And feel free to unmute and share anything during the discussion portion at the end as well. Note that we will be recording these sessions to share by email with recent grads after and to post on alumni.harvard.edu. Before we kick it off, I'll share a bit of background information. The Harvard Alumni Association, the HAA, is the official association of all alumni of Harvard University. The HAA maintains and enhances a highly engaged, vibrant community of alumni and friends worldwide. The College Alumni Programs Office of the HAA serves more than 100,000 Harvard and Radcliffe College alumni. The HAA Recent Graduate Engagement Committee, made up of the class committee leadership across the classes, facilitates the meaningful engagement of Harvard College recent graduates with the Harvard alumni community. And now we'll hear from our speakers. First up is Avanti Nagral, AB class of 2020, who will speak about graduating from the Harvard Berkeley dual degree program to work in music, performance, and digital content and building a startup at the intersection of the creative and tech worlds, leveraging her digital community of over 1.5 million followers. Avanti, over to you.
Thank you so much, Chibi, and thank you so much for y'all tuning in. I know it's different time zones. I'm actually tuning in from India right now, so it's pretty early in the morning. But I guess I wanted to touch upon a few things here, and I'm curious if anybody, feel free to share in the chat what context you're coming in with, in the sense that are you currently looking to pivot from a career you might be in, or if there's any specific note or question you have. But I graduated in 2020 during the pandemic, and the plan was to go into performance and public speaking full time. For context, I have been a performing artist for a while, came into college with that, and I was the first person to do the Harvard Berkeley program, which was a really fun program to allow me to, I guess, tap into both worlds. And, the networks at both of these institutions are obviously unparalleled. And I think that one of the biggest things that I took away from my college experience was being able to be surrounded by so much wonderful intellectual diversity. And it wasn't necessarily about the what we learned in the classroom, but I think later on how everything kind of came together. Um, for me, having graduated in the middle of the pandemic, the option was to completely pivot or to figure out, okay, how do I turn my performance career into something bigger, right? Or into something that adapts to this new world. Had you asked me back in college if I would ever be a YouTuber or if I would ever enter the digital world, I would have probably thought you were insane. But kind of that's what we adapted to. And my 2 cents would be for anybody looking to build pretty much anything, right? Whether you are looking to get into the digital content space, whether you're looking to get into the artistic space, or you're looking to get into building anything more broadly. I think it's useful to think of not necessarily even what you're building, but of yourself as a startup, right? Because the more you start to think about yourself in a capacity where you are a brand, whatever that might be, and you show up representing whether it's certain qualities, certain things you want to talk about. If you think of yourself as a human being with a mission statement, a human being with something to contribute to the world, and try to figure out what that sense of purpose is, I think it helps drive things. I can give a specific example. I think for me, yes, I'd been in the performance space for a while, but transitioning to the digital space was interesting because you kind of have to approach it as if you are building a business, but you just happen to be the product as well as the entrepreneur and as well as everything in between. And I think that's one of the hardest things to figure out. Okay, how do you sell yourself? Because if I were to sell a pen to you, I can be kind of objective about the product I'm selling. But when it comes to yourself, it's trying to figure out, okay, how do I leverage everything that I have? And also, how do I take that forward? And I think a few of the things that helped me were recognizing that to build any kind of brand project and to set out on this journey, I would call it a triangle of three things that people typically respond to and care about. The first is relatability, the second is aspiration, and the third is inspiration. And if you're able to hit any of these apexes, or ideally be at the intersection of all, you're able to build a compelling narrative and story and appeal to different parts of people's sensibilities. Um, Even if you were to build a physical brand or a physical product, right? It's about, okay, how do you tell this story in the most authentic way possible? And content or the digital space can be quite overwhelming for a lot of folks because, especially now in 2025, it's quite a saturated space and it's a space that is kind of necessary for any business, but it might be one of those things that you might be figuring out, okay, where do I start? And I think the way I would recommend is by figuring out what plays to your strengths. If you're somebody who's comfortable with being able to share more, if you're someone who's comfortable with writing, I think LinkedIn is a great place to start with and to be able to convert that kind of written content into more factoids on many other platforms is a useful way to just get your toes, dipped to try to understand, okay, how are people responding to this? What can I kind of contextualize myself with? And how do I put things together in multiple different ways that represents who I am as a person? Um, the other thing I think that was really, really useful is recognizing that anybody and everybody is part of your extended network. People that you might have met in the most random situations are potentially one day going to be people you can meet and collaborate with. And I think the biggest thing, right, when you're building anything is collaboration is key because it allows you to bring your perspective and a lot of other people's perspectives together. And you see that now with the rising boom of podcasts. You see that right now with the rising boom of different perspectives that people are bringing together. And I think the most important thing on this journey, generally for me, has been, okay, how do I draw from different parts of my background, different parts of things I care about, the artistic world, the academic world, and how do I make it make sense, even if it doesn't necessarily make sense to the average person? You don't necessarily have to worry about, okay, what is a niche I occupy, but rather how do I represent myself in the multiple ways possible and bring the best perspectives to that. And I'm super happy to answer any questions about entering these worlds and what that looks like full time. But I think we have a bunch of different perspectives today, and I'm really, really excited to hear from them.
Thank you, Avanti. Next up is Brianna Apong Antwi, AV Class of 2019, who will speak about the tutoring business and other endeavors on Teachers Pay Teachers in Etsy. Brianna, over to you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Brianna Ponantweet, and I'm thrilled to be here with you today. Just a few years ago, I was sitting in your place as a Harvard student, balancing coursework and dreaming about what life after graduation might look like. Fast forward to now, boy, I could not imagine it. I've embarked on an entrepreneurial journey that includes founding my own tutoring business, Learn With Me Tutoring, Learn With Me, Learn With Bree, and building creative ventures like my Teachers Take Teachers and Etsy shops under the name Spanish with Brianna. So today I wanted to share how I turned the small ideas into real world ventures, a lesson I've learned along the way, and why entrepreneurship is a powerful avenue for carving your own path. So I really like helping people learn. I was a TA at Harvard. I TA'd for biology. I tutored all throughout Harvard with companies like Set Sail. So tutoring in biology and English and Spanish, I found joy in breaking down complex concepts into understandable pieces. And the passions grew into a question of what if I could do this on my own terms? So After graduation, was tutoring for a company called Varsity Tutors, which is the biggest tutoring company in America. And I found out that they were paying us tutors $15 an hour, while students were paying up to $125 an hour for lessons. So I thought, you know what? I could do this in a way that's a lot more economical for everyone and where I can control the narrative. So after graduating, I founded Learn With Me Tutoring, a platform where I provide personalized academic support to students from across various levels, everything from learning how to read to the SAT. And around the same time, I started creating Spanish language resources for teachers and students, which I now sell on platforms like Teachers Pay Teachers and Etsy. I'm working on Amazon right now. And what began as a side hustle is now a thriving business and how I support myself. So how do I just turn these ideas into action? Starting something from scratch is both exhilarating and intimidating. For my tutoring business, I leaned heavily on skills I developed at Harvard, like problem solving, time management is big, organization, Excel spreadsheets, communication. I learned a lot of these soft skills in my extracurriculars as well. And I also learned new skills like setting up a website, marketing my services, and managing finances. For my Spanish resources, it was about identifying a gap. I realized that teachers often lack engaging, ready-to-use material for language classes. I started creating resources that are practical, fun, and tailored to real classroom needs. It was a small step, uploading my first product and nervously waiting to see if anyone would buy it, but now I have regular customers who use my materials in their classroom worldwide. So I just feel that entrepreneurship is an incredible teacher. I've learned so much, and I want you to know that whether or not you see yourself as an entrepreneur, I encourage you to think about what excites you and how you can create value for others. Use what excites you and what you're already passionate about. I took Spanish every single semester at Harvard. I got a Spanish language citation. I just loved it. And I love teaching others Spanish and I love making it fun and approachable for others. So think about what drives you. And entrepreneurship doesn't have to mean starting the next unicorn company. It can be as simple as turning a passion into a side hustle, solving a problem you care about, or building something meaningful on your own terms. For me, running my businesses has been about independence, creativity, and making an impact, values that Harvard has instilled in me. The skills that you guys are developing here can take you in countless directions, and entrepreneurship is just one of them. So for those of you considering entrepreneurship, take the leap. Start small, be persistent, and don't be afraid to learn as you go. Every journey begins with a single step. So thank you so much for having me here today. I'd love to answer any questions or share more about my experiences. And remember, the best time to start something new is now.
Thank you, Brianna. Next up is George Ko, AB Class of 2015, who will speak about entrepreneurship as an independent artist. George, over to you.
Thanks, Jibby. Hey everyone, how's it going? My name is George Ko. My artist name is GKO, and I'm based out here in LA. And I'm just so happy to speak to everyone. And it's so interesting to be talking about this now because I remember being in your seats where you're tuning in from around the world, going to these events, mostly in person in LA and New York when I just graduated from Harvard. So world's kind of come full 360. I know we're gonna be doing a Q&A later, and I know you guys have a lot of amazing questions. So I'll talk a little bit about my career, what I've learned, and from the perspective of an artist. So it might be a little bit different from other entrepreneurs who are pursuing more traditional, like small businesses with consumer products or in tech. But I hope that at least my experience can help provide some insight. And if you have any questions, of course, please ask in the chat or when we do our Q&A later. So there's 5 things I kind of want to talk about as a quick takeaway of what I've learned from trying to pursue a career in the arts, which is very challenging. A little bit quickly about me. I graduated from Harvard with a degree in music. I thought I was going to be a classical concert pianist. In fact, I took a gap year to study at a conservatory. I toured for a year. I hated it. I started some other companies. I helped exit one. Didn't know what I was going to do. Then during COVID, like most of us, I fell back into a passion, fell back into music, and I kind of started from ground zero. At 27, I was broke, and had a crazy dream of becoming an artist. So how did I get there? I think the first piece of advice I would give is know your hunger. I think we're always pressured, especially in a competitive environment at Harvard, that we have to compete, that we have to like be the best, or we have to be the next unicorn. I like what Brianna was saying earlier, like you don't have to be the next unicorn. I wish someone said that earlier to me during my freshman year at Harvard. But I think it's like understanding where your hunger comes from and what's like the source of it, I think is really important. I think before all of my other success or lack of success, the hunger came from needing validation from others. And when I started doing music for myself and writing my own music, that hunger came from within. And I think that kind of hunger is the most genuine and the most intoxicating, but also healthy. So I think understanding where the source of your hunger is before you start any endeavor in entrepreneurship is super important. The second thing was because I was been so out of touch with music for so long, I had to be really good at what I do, right? Like I have to think about perspective, especially after COVID. People are giving your money and time to, to empower your music. Like, hopefully, you're inspiring them with your art, but at the same time, they're giving you the resources they've worked so hard for to you. So you have to be at least pretty good at what you do. So working on your craft is really important. And for me, I I wanted to get into improvisation, and I just worked on that, and I practiced, and I listened to a lot of music, and I did a lot of pop-up shows. I think to date from 3.5 years ago, I performed over 150 live shows and almost 300 digital shows. So it's just like putting in the work, honing your craft, getting your music out there. And then that comes to the third part is put it out there. I shared my music everywhere. And kind of what helped start my career was there was this weird app during COVID called Clubhouse. I don't know if you guys remember. It was like audio for Twitter. It's super weird. But I kind of went viral on there because MC Hammer decided to like be my moderator for my piano rooms, and it went viral. And that's how I got started. It was super weird. I just started playing music, and people liked it. Then they wanted merch. Then they wanted to come to shows. So putting it out there, like anything can happen, but being consistent and putting out quality work, it will connect, and hopefully that connection also leads to success from the dollar side. Um, and the next part for me was asking for help because even though I've done startups and worked consulted for like these big tech companies, building a career as a musician, you don't really know what's going on, and it's so different from the traditional path. And um, sometimes I wasn't sure if what I was communicating with my art was really uh, being communicated honestly to my fans. And so I asked my friends who were industry professionals, people who own record labels, professional photographers, that could help me. And I was, I think you'd be surprised how much people are willing to help you if they believe in you, even if you don't have the budget. Like that time is still broke. Like my friend, he does photo shoots for Nike and Formula One, and I was like, "Hey, can you help me find a photographer that's really cheap but good because I can't afford it?" And then he ended up doing the whole shoot, and I just paid for like going to Korean barbecue, and like I'm so indebted to his photography because that photography got me a gig with Vacheron Constantin, and so like asking for help so essential. The last thing I want to say, the big takeaway for me was being flexible. There's no straight path in a career. Anything can happen. You have ups and downs. One quick example, I was supposed to compose the music for Avatar: The Last Airbender for Netflix, and I spent 3 months working on the score, and then they dropped me and went with someone else, and I lost my entire year worth of income. And so then you're like, oh, I have no more money. Uh, and so you have to be flexible. If you want to keep the dream going, what do you do? And so because of my tech and brand background, sometimes I do consulting on the side, or like sometimes I'll email my friend who owns like a restaurant and I'll be like, hey, I'll just like do me some please. I'll just like prep food when I'm not doing music for 6 hours and try to get an income. I think learning to be flexible is super important and never see that as failure. Everyone that you love who's made it on their own, not classic Nepo baby, was super flexible. Like Gene Simmons worked for the Parks Department to pay the bills before Kiss got a record label. So like be flexible, keep going. I'm still being flexible as best as I can. Last year was a rough year, but what gets you through it is knowing your hunger, work on your craft, and then the hard work pays off. Like you get like the fans are everything. Like the messages I get from the fans on Instagram or in person at shows. Like this mom always comes to this show in London and brings her daughter because her daughter wanted to play piano because she watched a YouTube video and she's still taking piano lessons. You know, like things like that just make the hard work worth it. But yeah, I think that's the 5 minutes. I hope I was able to impart some wisdom from my ramblings. And of course, I'm happy to answer any of your questions afterwards. And thank you so much.
Thank you, George. Next up is Katie Dolan, AB class of 2018, who will speak about becoming a self-employed consultant, building a roster of clients, and the pros and cons of self-employment versus traditional employment. Katie, over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. This has been really fun already, just listening to everyone else. So let me start by a story that I hope is not that relatable to you, but I suspect that for many of you, it is very relatable, which is that I found myself about a year after graduation in just the worst job ever with the worst manager ever. And it was horrible. And the worst part of it was that was actually the second terrible job I'd had in a year. I had one terrible job, I quit that one, and then I had a second terrible job. And the first terrible job looked a hell of a lot like Devil Wears Prada, if you've ever seen that movie, which was terrible. So I was really, really struggling. I was crying after work, like things were awful. And I just imagined that there really had to be a better way of living if I just trusted myself. And if I took all of that time and energy that I was giving to other people's companies and other people's ideas and just put all that time into myself and my ideas and my brand, if you will. So ultimately I quit my job and wanted to become a self-employed freelancer or consultant. And I said that I'm going to do this for 3 months. And if at the end of 3 months I'm not making any money, then I will try and go back and get a normal job. But I think 3 months is a short amount of time that I can just give this the old college try, if you will. And then I ultimately did that for 2 years. It was very successful. I believe in being really frank about money. I think that's really important in these conversations. So I'm very happy to share that I was making 150 grand back then. That's about 180 grand a year, inflation adjusted now in 2025. So I was making quite a lot of money, more money than many of my Harvard classmates were making in traditional consulting or even finance. So, you know, I wasn't really sacrificing much. I was making a lot of money. I was working fully remotely pre-pandemic. I had my own schedule. I had my own clients, my own interests. So there are a lot of great things about this path. And I have a very limited time to talk about it. So I'll summarize with kind of 3 main things that I think you should know if you're thinking about doing this. And then I'm very happy to chat with you more individually if you'd like to go deeper into it. But 3 main takeaways. I think number 1, you do need to find some sort of a niche that is not too big, but not too small, and then go from there and pivot and change. It's a work in progress over time. So you see a lot online that you need to be like hyper niche to become a freelancer or consultant. I don't think that's really true, particularly frankly with a Harvard degree. I think you get a little more freedom. That's the privilege that we have. And so not too niche, but niche enough. So for instance, I think an example of like a good niche of a consultant or freelancer is a startup marketer. Recognizable what you do, recognizable what you don't do, but also means many things. And there's kind of flexibility in there for you to say yes to a lot of opportunities. An example of a niche that I think is too small that you see a lot on like websites like Fiverr or Upwork or anything is like a QuickBooks online expert for mid-sized dental offices. I wish I was kidding, but that's how a lot of people think about it. That to me is too niche. You don't have enough market opportunity there. But then something that's not niche enough is strategy consultant. Way too broad. What do you do? I don't know. I'm not sure if you should work for me or not. I'm not really sure what you know and what you do. So number 1, find a niche that's kind of in between being too small and too big. I think number 2, while I think there's a lot of great things about this path and being a freelancer or a consultant, you do need to keep in mind one of the key downsides, which is that having many clients means having many bosses. Instead of your normal job where you have one boss, you now have many clients at a time and they are all your bosses. This is a service business. It's heavily dependent on being responsive and kind of juggling a lot. And you can't like leverage projects against each other like you can at your normal 9 to 5. Like you can't say to your boss like, oh, well, I'm doing this for my other boss, so I can't do this for you. Nope, your clients don't know about each other. They don't care what you're doing for other clients. So you have to do it all for everyone kind of all at once. And that can be overwhelming and can eat a little bit into the work-life balance if you're not careful. And then number 3, probably the single most important piece of advice when it comes to consulting and freelancing, in my opinion, is fake it till you make it. You do not need to know what you're doing. You just need to pretend that you do. And that is how you get a lot of your business and a lot of your success. So say yes first, figure it out later. And that is really kind of what unlocked all of my, success as a startup consultant. And then I should make clear as well that I consulted for a couple of years. That unlocked a lot of full-time offers at my clients, one of which I ultimately took. And so I'm not currently consulting anymore, though I still consult on the side. So a lot of opportunity is unlocked if you just fake it till you make it. And the very last thing I'll leave you with is a quote that in many ways has like defined my whole life, but particularly this consulting period of my life, which is a bird sitting on a tree is never afraid of the branch breaking because its trust is not on the branch, it's on its own wings. And that is the mindset that I think can be a huge career unlock when you're no longer dependent on the system. You are trusting in yourself of being able to create all the opportunities and money and, fulfillment that you can just from within your own self. So that's it for me. I'm very, very, very happy to chat after this. If you're interested in anything that I've discussed, I'm going to drop my email address in the chat and would love to connect. But wishing you all the best.
Thank you, Katie. Next up is Lisa Wang, AB Class of 2023, who will speak about learnings in the climate tech startup space in the Bay Area on daylight climate. Lisa, over to you.
Thanks, Chibi. Yeah, really excited to be here. As Chibi mentioned, I'm in the climate tech scene here in the Bay Area, and I've been working in climate since 2015. And although, due to the recent administration, a lot of the climate incentives that we had over the last few years seem like they'll be going away, I'm still incredibly optimistic about our ability to continue to decarbonize and address the climate crisis. So I studied environmental science and engineering and minored in energy at Harvard. And I think some of the themes that I really want to share and focus on within entrepreneurship are in building community and really helping to solve problems and understanding what people need, whether that's, a sustainability manager at a large company or an energy operations manager at a manufacturing plant. And so currently, I am still working full-time at Antora, which is a thermal battery startup here in the Bay, where I'm learning a ton about what it means to build, a technology company, learning from strong cultures and founders, where the focus of our company is decarbonizing industry, which is a third of global emissions, but at the same time doing so with a lot of humility. I think I've met founders who are, incredibly bright, but maybe don't create a strong sense of community or belonging for their team. And so that's something I'm really learning about at Antora. And I think when it comes to entrepreneurship today, with the massive opportunities online, there's also a huge opportunity to create like digital communities. So you might have heard about how you can create for audiences of one. When you start creating a product or a solution, really focusing on one specific person or user and their problems, really like creating something that is very targeted and actually solves their problems before scaling and creating, a scaled business out of it, I think is huge. And a really exciting way to do that is to build a community of people who you just got to know really well, who feel like they can ask questions to each other and help to solve problems, and also to lean on each other. And I think with platforms like Substack, where I also write and share a lot about what I'm learning within the climate tech space and within startups, is a really great platform to do that. But I think the roots of a lot of what I'm thinking about today, which is in, like trying to answer the question, how do we scale the climate tech solutions that we have today? Like we already have a lot of electric vehicles, battery technologies, heat pumps to help electrify manufacturing processes. How do we actually get the large Fortune 500s of the world to adopt them? And that's a lot of my day-to-day job here at Antora. But on the side, I'm also working on Daylight Climate, which is really a platform that will help to scale these climate tech solutions and also bring in individuals across roles from policy, economics, technology to understand what their role is in addressing the climate crisis. So, we've all seen these fires in LA recently. It's still really discouraging. But I think what's also given me a ton of hope and resilience is knowing that there are so many people who are continuing to work on this problem. And again, like this idea of community, of working alongside cohorts of people with the same vision for the world, with the same passion, even if they're approaching it from different angles, and especially if they're approaching it from different angles, has been incredibly motivating for me. And so the idea with Daylight, which I'm again continuing to build on the side as a business, and going back to what Brianna said earlier, is you can start small. You don't have to have a huge company right away. Just like take baby steps in the direction that you want to go. That's kind of the mentality that I'm taking with Daylight here. And again, like I think when it comes to solving new problems, we're all kind of doing this for the first time. And so it's really helpful to have models and share knowledge from the experiences that we're having. So, sharing knowledge from everyone, such as everyone's stories on this call, but also in like sharing stories from Antora, where we're building these large first of a kind battery projects at factories for the first time, and kind of creating a template from which future companies and technologies can learn from, and actually thinking about how they might address the energy operations managers' questions in the same way, so that we can kind of stand on the shoulders of giants and, not have to do things from scratch each time. So yeah, that's a bit about what I've been learning in the startup space. I think there's a huge unlock when you're really building for a specific user and solving a specific problem, and then kind of creating a playbook that you can then scale to other industries or solutions. And then in terms of, again, community, when you're able to connect the right decision makers in an ecosystem. So again, I'll use the climate tech and like corporate sustainability space as an example, but you can apply this to whatever space you're building in, is that if you're able to, let's say, connect someone who's in the policy space. Again, I'm in industrial decarbonization. We collaborate with industry groups like the Renewable Thermal Collaborative. We have a lot of folks in DC who work with policymakers as well. If we can understand what the policymakers are incentivized to do or trying to accomplish in, for example, like helping to craft a tax credit description for the IRA, startups on this other side of the ecosystem can also express, hey, like it would help us scale a ton if you could incorporate this specific requirement, or highlight the fact that manufacturers can use these factory built batteries in the policy. Like that would really help us out. It would make our projects a lot more economic, and it would help us decarbonize much faster. And then we can tell that story to another member of the ecosystem, which might be, again, like a large Fortune 500 who might not really care about actually decarbonizing or reducing emissions, but they might care a lot about their energy efficiency and manufacturing. And so what I'm seeing is that when people think about startups and entrepreneurship, it can feel like you're operating in a silo, but really, if you're able to connect different parts of the ecosystem, even if you start out as a smaller entity or company, like you can create massive change. And when I joined Antora, we were about 50 people. I was the fifth person on the commercial team, working in partnership with some of our policy folks, business development, product, connecting with our engineers a bit. But now we're 200 people. We've helped to shape some of the really critical climate policy here in the States. And we're working with these huge industrials and Fortune 500s. And when I asked the founders of the company, like, hey, you guys started this company when you're doing right out of your PhDs, you had never really worked in industry before. How did you get all of these partners? We're backed by investors like Breakthrough Energy, Bill Gates Fund, and now Decarbonization Partners, which is the BlackRock and Temasek joint venture. Again, this all started out of a lab. Like, how did you manage to scale your startup this way? And one of the co-founders said, really communicating clearly and trying to help other people solve their problems with genuine curiosity and integrity. And then also kind of aligning and associating with other groups that have a lot of credibility. So I think those are some really interesting takeaways where, again, I feel really optimistic that There's so many smart people working on solutions to climate change, again, from the tech side, from the policy side, from creating the right incentives and carbon pricing mechanisms that will actually create systems as opposed to band-aids that will help us to decarbonize at scale. So I'm really excited about that. And I'm trying to create an online community through Daylight Climate that will help future founders in this space kind of do so much more easily. And yeah, so like Katie said, also super happy to chat after the webinar. I'll put something in the chat to just share the Substack and resources if you are also interested in getting into climate.
Thanks, Lisa. Our final speaker is Mohammed Attila, AB class of 2016, who will speak about his roles with Club Feast and Seated, with a focus on identifying inefficiencies and leveraging them for growth, adapting to market trends, raising funds, and leveraging technology to streamline operations. Mohammed, over to you.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. So I'm more the typical startup person. So went through, multiple rounds of fundraising. So I've been in the restaurant tech side for all my career. My first company, Seated, we applied dynamic pricing for the sit-down industry. So I'm always, whenever I go anywhere, I always look around like what's happening. And I would always observe like empty tables at the restaurant at like 5 p.m. And then 7 p.m. it's packed. So I'm not a tech person. I don't know how to write a line of code, but I was always interested in how can we, get people to fill those tables. So with Seated, it's a very simple concept. We offer gift cards. So you would get a $40 Amazon gift card if you go at the restaurant at 5 p.m. instead of 7 p.m. So again, using online tools to kind of, shift demand and make restaurants, more profitable. And we scaled that company to hundreds of restaurants and sold it in 2019. Afterwards, started Club Feast. So with Club Feast, we focused on, still, online now. We do corporate kind of catering. So we utilize local kitchens and local restaurants during their off-peak hours to allow them to compete with big chains. So we give them a longer heads up to allow them to be, plan the days better, buy their supply, and have better chance of competing against like Chipotle's or Kavas of the world. I saw some of the questions we got, earlier, and one of them was, how can I get started? And so we raised, for both companies, we raised a good amount of funding. And I think fundraising is many times is misunderstood. Because with fundraising, you need to understand three concepts. The first one is why you, right? So the first thing an investor wants to look for is, why should I choose you? For every single person, there are 1,000 other people pitching the same exact idea. So you really want to focus on what makes you special. And you don't need to be an industry expert of 20 years, but you need to show passion. Because I'm going to tell you, it's going to take you at least 5+ years to or more to find an exit. So you need to be actually obsessed with this space and ask questions, talk to users. As some of you mentioned before, not be shy, ask for help. Second thing is, of course, why now? And I think that's probably the most important question. So now you all see the whole AI hype, right? And now if you go to an investor and try to pitch what I pitched them even 4 years ago, they're going to kick you out of the room because investors are all about the AI hype. The way to think about it with every wave, you remember the blockchain crypto wave, the Uber of everything wave, where we had an Uber for a massage, an Uber for literally dry cleaning, an Uber for every single thing. You need to ask yourself, like, what we're in now. Why? Because in most cases, the low-hanging fruit has already been done before. So if you want to pitch a marketplace today, think about it. Something that the technology has been around for over 10+ years. Most probably, either many people tried it and it failed, or the market is very, very small for the idea, or something happened in those 10 years that did not create a winner. Whereas if you go to an investor now and you have an idea in the AI space, most probably, you're probably one of the first, 100 people who are thinking about the idea, and there's still not a clear winner in this space. So even if there's a competitor, they're still, still young. And this is how investors really think. So this is why now we're lucky we're in a new, wave of things, and now it's the AI wave. So my advice, if you want to start a company now, definitely be in the AI space. Don't be stubborn. I think, being stubborn, which is point number 3, and is, as one of you I think mentioned, about being flexible and just understanding kind of what you're getting into. You need to be flexible. When COVID hit, many companies lost 95% of their customers, and they had to survive to make it to the better days. So being flexible is critical across every single stage. These 3 things would cover, I would say, 80% or so of the process. The last 20%, which is very critical, is the people, and we're lucky we met so many great people at Harvard. Those are your co-founders, those are your early employees. So really invest in your network. And I think Katie, or I forgot who said this, about like everyone could be, a network or a friend at some point. That's so true. Wherever you go, if you have a good conversation with someone, like now we have people sharing their email address, or add them on LinkedIn. You never know. You might add me on LinkedIn today, 2 years from now, I don't know, you ask me for a reference or something, referral, or whatever it is. So I would say don't ever be shy to extend your network. And of course, don't ask for stuff immediately, right? You can't add someone and ask them the next day, right? But the point is, think of network as, I think one of you mentioned the idea of a brand. It's critical to understand you are your network, right? So people vouching for you, people trusting you. And the last thing, just for time's sake, with fundraising, raising the first 100,000 is harder than raising the next $30 million. And I'll tell you this, when it took us more time to raise $25,000 than raising tens of millions. So just start, whatever you're working on, just literally go out there, start it, and then just slowly work on it. You will figure it out. Just as long as you're obsessed with it, you'll do well. I think, John, that is time, correct?
All right, thank you, Mohammed. Now, for our final few minutes, we'll open up to Q&A, discussion, and sharing of resources. We also welcome sharing of any resource links in the chat. Please use the raise hand function in Zoom, and we'll call on you.
I can see there are a lot of questions.
But I can't, my service is bad. I can't raise my hand.
You go ahead, Blade. I have to circle back on that.
I think his connection is bad.
Yeah.
I would love to ask a question for the Avanti. So when you started, how was the growth of your subscribers? Like, were the first 50,000 the most difficult, or how did the growth happen? Or did you go viral, or was it linear growth?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm curious anybody's thoughts on this as well. To your point, I think building anything, it's always that 0 to 1 that is the hardest. And I think a lot of people index on virality, but virality only takes you so far, right? Um, Virality is a moment in time, but it's not what helps build a sustainable, lifelong, or even, medium-term brand. I think it's important to instead index on how do you build community and how do you build micro-virality. And if I'm using startup terms, right, because I think most people here are familiar, um, building any kind of business, especially a more amorphous creative business, I think there's 2 people you need to care about. You need to care about your super fans or your most active consumers or customers, and you need to care about your discoverable audience, which is the end person that you're trying to reach with whatever your product or focuses at that point. Anybody else is pretty much noise because people will come in and out. Even in a digital world, people constantly follow, unfollow. And so you caring about catering to everybody in anything that you're doing, I think Katie also mentioned, right? It is important to have like a broad sense of a niche, but it is important to know what your niche is. And that can be something that is intersectional, right? It can be you bringing two different perspectives. I got a lot of advice when I started in the digital world saying stick to a lane, right? And I was someone who was coming from both the music space and the social impact space. I studied global health and psychology in college and really cared about combining the two. And most people were like, pick a lane. And I was like, okay, how do I actually bring them together instead? And some of the moments that did actually help was trying to combine what made me feel like most myself. For example, I grew up in a South Asian context, and in a lot of different cultures in the world, talking about certain topics openly feels a little bit more taboo. And so I said, okay, if I just simply talk about things that I think are important, such as sex ed, mental health, periods, menstruation, that's one perspective. But how can I bring other perspectives? So I made songs about mental health. I made songs about consent to make it more accessible. I sat my 92-year-old grandma down and had these conversations as a way to kind of help break that stigma and taboo and make it more accessible. So it's just figuring out, okay, what is your core purpose and messaging, and what are different angles at which you can talk about it? And that, rather than focusing on a niche or focusing on, okay, getting a specific set of subscribers or followers, because that doesn't really matter, right? At the end of the day, it's not about the numbers, it's about how engaged and sticky your community is in anything that you're building. And that can come from, okay, are people along for the journey of the story of your personal brand, the story of the company you're building? And I think that story is more important than pretty much anything else. And so, I think in today's world, with short form being the primary way of engaging for a lot of people, um, it's a way to get these short spark moments of virality. But the most important thing is, how do you sustain that and how do you build a meaningful community?
Thank you. Blade.
Can you guys hear me?
We can.
Can you guys hear me?
You can. Can you hear us? I think the connection's not good, unfortunately, Blade. So why don't we plan to close it with Brianna if you want to address Dennis's question, and then we'll wrap from there. And Blade, maybe we can follow up offline afterwards.
Okay, I was actually just writing him a response, but I'll answer for everyone. I'm glad that I can. So about setting up a backup plan in case your project doesn't work. Okay, so for me, I was tutoring someone, I think it was Katie, mentioned that instead of having one boss, now you have many bosses. And that's how it was for me doing Learn With Me tutoring. I was tutoring from 3 p.m. to every single night. And on top of that, I was still waiting tables, and I was doing a 9 to 5 until um, I was doing a 9 to 5 until about halfway through the business. So I would say that you still might have to keep your day job. You still might have to keep, the bills paid. But if you're really passionate about it, you can grow it into your main plan. It's not just your backup plan.
Thank you. I saw George put an
Thank
answer in
you.
the chat as well.
Mhm.
Yeah, thank
Great.
you.
Okay, thanks, Chippy. We'll turn it over to you to close us out.
All right. Thank you again to Avanti, Brianna, George, Katie, Lisa, Mohammed, and all of our participants today. Our eighth real world event for recent grads will be happening soon, and we'll be discussing personal relationships and milestones. Email invitations with a confirmed date will follow. And thank you all again.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Peace.